Hello and welcome to another Football Manager 2015 video. Today we're going to be having a look at something a little bit more advanced than things we've covered so far. We did have a little look at tactics, and I did give you an overview of how tactics works and how to pick what kind of tactic you want and things like that. But today I thought I would focus on something a bit more specific, and that is going to be, as you can see from the screen, opposition instructions. Because I know that when I first started playing Football Manager, which was quite a few years ago now actually, or I can't even remember when they first introduced this. The first time I started using opposition instructions anyway, it was quite confusing, and I didn't really know what to do, in what scenarios to use them and things like that. And I would always click this button up here, which is Apply Advice to Team, which means that your coach that you've got selected here, which is usually your assistant manager, is going to pick the instructions for you, and that's okay if you've got a good setup, but it's probably best that you understand how it works anyway, just so that you can have a look at what your assistant manager's doing, double check it, stuff like that. So we're going to begin by looking at the first category over here, which is type marking. So what is type marking? Type marking, as the name would suggest, is how close your players get to the opposition players when they're marking them. So if we click Stuart Downing, who for some reason is playing in the centre of the park, if we look at Stuart Downing, we have that, which is the default nothing, then we have never and always. So if you choose always, they're always going to tightly mark them. If you choose never, well, they're never going to tightly mark them. So what is this useful for? Well, if you're looking to always tightly mark someone, that's the kind of thing you want to do to a player who needs time on the ball, who's going to make chances happen. So someone with good creativity and good decisions and that kind of thing. By tightly marking them, you can stop them from receiving the ball in the first place and try and cut them out as a playmaking source. And that's fairly straightforward. When would you not want to use it then? Because surely if that was the case, then you'd want to use that against every creative player. Well, maybe not, because if you're doing it against a player that has really good pace and acceleration, for example, they could receive the ball and turn their marker like that with a click of the fingers. So you have to be careful. You have to make sure that if you're tightly marking a pacey player, that the player you're using to mark the pacey player also has some decent pace or acceleration. The other time when it might not be a good idea is, say, it would have been useful if they were playing Andy Carroll actually. Say the player you're trying to mark is good in the air, so they have good height, good jumping ability and good heading ability. If your marker doesn't, and a ball is coming through the air, then he's going to beat your defending player in the air every time and just take your defender completely out of the game. So in that situation, you would maybe want to click never. If someone is very, very good in the air, then maybe you don't want to tightly mark them. Maybe it'd be best to take another approach, like stopping the service rather than actually stopping the player. But that doesn't apply to Stuart Downing because he's not very good in the air. But you know, you get the gist of it. In order to pull that off successfully, you really need good marking skills on the player, good concentration and good anticipation, because he's going to be anticipating balls coming into the player that he's marking, and you know, obviously he's going to need a good marking ability. That kind of goes without saying. If we can just look at Alex Song, he's not actually as good at marking as I thought. We can just have a look at my team. Have I got anyone? I think Gerard's okay at marking. Oh, he's okay. He's got good tackling, maybe not good marking, but anyway, you've all seen the stats before. You get the idea. So maybe in this scenario, who would I mark? To be honest, I don't really know the West Ham team that well. I would maybe look to mark this guy, Mark Noble. Just having a look. He hasn't got good heading or jumping ability. He's not a particularly pacey player, but he is someone that they would probably expect to make a few things happen in midfield, so I would probably tightly mark him. Okay, so next on the agenda we've got closing down, which is this column here. Closing down, let's have a look at the options. You've got never and always again. So closing down is when your players are closing down an opposition player. So they're running at them. They're trying to stop them from having time on the ball. So obviously, if you choose always, your players are always going to close down that player, and if you choose never, they're never going to close down that player. Alternatively, by the way, if you click this, which is the default thing, then that goes without saying, but that's just no instruction. That'll just be whatever you've got your team or player instructions to do. But anyway, so when would you use this? You would select always for closing down on players that maybe have poor first touch, so that you can, when you have their poor first touch, you can steal the ball off them. Players with poor balance and pace that can't really get away, you want to charge them down with your players. Players again that need time on the ball, you want to close them down as best you can. Maybe to put pressure on opposition defenders. So I personally quite often like to close down the keeper and maybe the fullbacks, or maybe they've got a weak centre back, or whatever. I like to always have my players close down defence. Although it's worth noting that you can do this in your individual player instructions as well by going player. I always have this. Actually, I can't do it here, but you get the idea. You don't always have to do it as an opposition instruction. And as well, isolating lone strikers. So I would look at, how do you pronounce his name? Mauro Zaretti, is that how you pronounce it? I'm not sure. But I would personally probably do closing down always, because he's on his own. You want to isolate him. He's not going to have much support, so just force him to give the ball away, really. That's what I'd be looking to do with him. When would you choose never? When is it a bad idea? Well, maybe players that have good agility and pace, because if you charge them down and they've got good technique, agility, pace, they're probably just going to knock the ball past you and create space for themselves. So, I don't know, excellent players like maybe Hazard and, Messi, Ruiz, players like that can just knock the ball away from you. You don't want to close down those kind of players, really, unless you've got someone who is defensively superb. Also, you don't want too many. You don't want to do it to too many attackers. So maybe I wouldn't close down like this triangle here. I wouldn't do all of them. Or maybe if they were playing 3 strikers or whatever, I wouldn't close down all 3. And that is solely for the reason that if you're being hit by 3 attackers running at your defence, you don't want your defenders running out of position to close people down. You want your defence to be a wall, a steady wall. You don't want them running all over the place. Especially if you're not a top club, then you probably don't have defenders that are cream of the crop. They've probably got some attributes that are maybe a bit weaker, like pace or off the ball, whatever, positioning. The last thing you want is your defenders running all over the place, because their attackers are just going to find space and they'll be like a hot knife through butter, as the saying goes, and you will be in trouble. So you want to, in that situation, you would want to do never. In order to be able to pull off closing down, really, you were looking at players that have good work rate and stamina, and maybe good acceleration and pace, but you don't need to be Usain Bolt to close someone down. You just need to have a reasonable level of pace for it to be effective. But you also need good positioning, I guess, as well, to be able to know where to go, when to get back into position and things like that. But that is quite a useful one. I almost always do it on the keeper to try and force the keeper to play it long, or at least I used to on the previous Football Managers. On this one, that you can actually use that as a specific instruction. But anyway, I digress. Next up is tackling, which is this column here. This is how hard your players will tackle, so what kind of tackles they're going to put in. If you click on this and you do hard, they're going to be sliding in, they're going to be rough with the opposition. If you do easy, then they're not going to be rough with the opposition. They're probably going to stay on their feet or whatever. And if you click normal, then that's just going to default to whatever the team tactic is for that. So if you've told the team to tackle hard, then normal will make that player tackle hard, unless you have to change it. So what would you use this for? Well, players that have poor bravery and strength, maybe. We just look at Downing. See, he's got terrible bravery. So I'd probably do it to Downing. I'd probably try and bully him a bit. So if we look at Stuart Downing, tackling, there we go, I'd probably go hard on him. Ooh, that sounded terrible. I'd probably tackle hard on him, because he's got poor bravery and strength. He's probably going to shy away from the harder challenges. The other time I like to try and tackle hard is it's a bit naughty, but if a player has already taken a knock or is maybe very, very tired and exhausted, then I try and tackle hard on them then to maybe try and cause a bit of an injury. I'm not sure how often that works. It certainly works if they already have a knock, I know that. That's a bit naughty, but you know, it's a game, so I don't care if someone gets hurt. Fuck 'em. So when should you not do hard? When should you tackle easily? Well, sometimes flair players, again, you'll notice a pattern that players of the kind of tricky flair, you know, Neymar, Suarez, Hazard, Messi kind of players, it's very hard to stop them. But again, you don't want to tackle hard on players like that very often, unless you have someone who is superb at tackling with a lot of pace, because if you tackle and they manage to evade the tackle, they are away off in the distance. They're just going to blow you away with their technique, and they're going to get past you. So if you're going to tackle hard on a player that has a lot of flair and technique, then you want to make sure that whoever's doing the tackling is absolutely superb at it, otherwise you may as well just not bother. Obviously for that you need attributes like tackling, concentration, aggression and decisions, because your players need to know the right situation for tackling hard. Also, I think if you have if the player that you're telling to say in this situation, I told them to tackle the striker hard in the game. If both my centre backs have what's the individual tendency? Is it stays on feet? Maybe, I can't remember. But there is an actual player tendency or trait so that they don't really go to ground when they tackle. So if you're telling your centre backs to go in hard on him and they have that trait, they're probably not going to do it, but that's something to watch out for. That's about that for tackling. Tackling is pretty straightforward. If you watch much football, then you probably get the gist of tackling. It's not rocket science. Next is show onto foot. Now this is an interesting one because it's not really like the others in that it has a couple of different uses in my opinion. But this is what side you're going to show the opposition players onto, which you either watch a lot of football and you know what I mean when I say that, or you don't, but you'll probably work it out anyway as we go over it. So let's have a look at one of the wingers here. So if I just check what foot he is, so he's right footed and he's playing on the left. So you think you don't want him coming inside with that foot maybe, because he's right-footed and he's playing on the left, so if he's cutting in from a wide position, he's going to be taking shots with his right foot, which you don't really want theoretically because that's his strongest foot. So if you went like this and went show onto foot, show onto left foot, then when he's attacking down the wing, he's going to be forced to go out wide rather than cut inside, and then he's going to be putting crosses in with his weakest foot rather than taking shots on goal with his strongest foot. That's a simple way of explaining how that works. It has several different purposes. For example, say they were playing Andy Carroll in the middle. You know he's good in the air. He's a force to be reckoned with, even if he is a bit slow. In that scenario, maybe you don't want to be pushing the wingers out wide. Maybe because you're looking at your centre backs and you're thinking, well, there's no point marking him because while he is slow, he's going to win everything in the air. So what are we going to do? We're going to stop the supply. So maybe in that situation, if Andy Carroll was playing up here, I would look at this and I would go, right, Jarvis needs to be shown onto his right foot, so that instead of going down the flank, he's going to have to cut inside. And I would do the same to this gentleman here. I have no idea how you pronounce his name, I'm afraid. I'm sorry any West Ham fans that watch this, I'm butchering your team. I would show him onto his left foot so that he also has to cut in. That would in theory stop the crosses to Andy Carroll. I'd probably do it with the fullbacks as well, maybe, depending on how attacking they were. And vice versa, if the striker is really poor in the air, then maybe you want to try and force the wingers to go out wide and put in crosses, because they're not going to be successful. That's another use for it. Another thing that I quite like to do is, say we're pressuring the opposition defence, so we've got closing down always. I also tend to do something like this. If I want the if I'm trying to, hang on, I'm just thinking of the best way to try and explain. Say I have an incredibly strong midfield, and I look at it and I think my midfield is going to completely dominate their midfield. I want the ball to be played through the centre, because that's where my strength is, that's where I think we're going to win the game. So maybe, rather than forcing the defence out wide, I would try and show them onto their opposite feet respectively, so that they're coming into the middle, because that means that the majority of their passes are likely to be into the middle, which is where I think I'm strongest. It's just a way of trying to control the game and control where the opposition are passing. Now obviously I'm not sure this would work with West Ham, because they have been traditionally under Sam Allardyce, well, maybe not this season so much, but last season, a long ball team, so their balls are going to be going over the top anyway. So you might not succeed trying to control the game that way, but that's something I like to try and do sometimes. It's a bit of a gamble, it doesn't always really work, but that is one way you can use it. So when is showing a player onto whichever foot ever a bad idea? Well, a lot of players, well, maybe not a lot, but some players are two-footed. In that situation, well, actually, I haven't showed you I've just realised I've actually left out one of the uses, so we'll rewind a second. Apart from showing them onto left and right, you'll also notice weaker foot. So with strikers, show them onto the weaker foot, you're always going to try and push them onto their weakest foot for getting shots away. It's good with centre midfielders as well. Show them onto the weaker foot, creative players that is, with good passing. So if you show them onto the weaker foot, their passing is probably going to be hurt quite a bit. They might not be able to pass quite as well. So that's good for strikers and centre mids, I like to think. It's going to restrict the shots, quality of the shots, and the quality of the passing. Which brings me to what I was about to say, which is when you should not really bother using any of these instructions. That is when you get a player who, I'm just going to check, no. Sometimes you'll get a player, you see here where it says right-footed, by the way, that's how you tell what foot they are. Sometimes it will say both, because they are two-footed, like Lionel Messi. In that situation, there's no point showing them onto the weaker foot, because they're strong with both feet, and these two probably won't matter that much. It pretty much doesn't make much difference when a player is two-footed. So that is pretty much opposition instructions in a nutshell. I've done my best to try and explain what each of these do. I know it can be a bit confusing and it can be quite a lot to take in, but I hope I've managed to give you a decent rundown anyway, to the point where you can actually work out what's going on. It's difficult to tell you how much you should be using these, because it is a lot of hassle to look through the individual opposition players and work out what you should be doing. Sometimes I can't really be bothered, to be honest, and I know a lot of players, they like to play the game at quite a fast pace, so it might not always be worth doing. So I'll just explain to you quickly what you can do to make the most of your assistant. So if I can, what's the best way to go out? Okay, give me 1 second. You'll see my assistant manager here. He has tactical knowledge of 20. You want to get an assistant manager with good tactical knowledge. Okay, so you want that to be as high as possible. You can see mine is 20. Now, if we go to scouting, and then assignments, you want next opposition. Julian Ward is currently doing it. His tactical knowledge isn't very good, but you want the scout who's doing next opposition to have good tactical knowledge as well. And then, when you get your scout reports, because that assignment, what it does is, it produces a scout report that comes to your inbox not long before the match. So if I can just find it. I think this actually does it automatically from the start of the game usually if you're a big club, so you shouldn't need to set all this up yourself, but I'm sure you can work out how to do it if it's not already there. Then you can look at team report, which tells you all the stuff about the team you're about to be facing, but most importantly it means that you have the best knowledge that you can have about the players that you're going to face in the next match, and how they play as well. But that means that when you go to the match and you get your assistant manager to apply his instructions, that A, his tactical knowledge is high, and B, his knowledge of the opposing team is high, so that he can give you the best instructions he possibly can. Like, I'm not particularly sure why he's picked the instructions that he has. I guess maybe it's quite a slow opposition team, but I'm not sure about... See, Mark Jarvis, do we really want to close him down all the time? I don't know. But again, it's a lot of this stuff is down to personal opinion as well. Like, I don't know, that's part of the fun of the game, is trying to work it out for yourself. For example, my assistant here, he's always closing down Mark Jarvis. I'm not sure that I would do that. Yes, he's got good acceleration and reasonable pace, which would maybe make me a little concerned about closing him down. But again, it depends who's closing him down. If it was maybe a winger closing him down, then I'd still have a defender, even if he blew him away. But whatever, I'm just getting sidetracked here. But yeah, that is a basic rundown of how opposition instructions work. I hope it's been of some use to you, and that wasn't too complicated, because I must admit sometimes I confuse myself when I'm going over all this stuff. But once again, thanks for watching. Feel free to comment, say whatever you want in the comments. If you've got any questions, then ask me and I'll do my best to help. And until next time, bye bye.